Hey, this is Nate Stewart. I'm a Dell server storage and networking specialist. We want to go over continuous protection simplified using Dell hardware and technology. We essentially just want to try and provide our small to medium business customers with a better way to kind of do backup strategies over some of the more traditional methods. So we're going to deep dive into that and kind of explore some of the options. First, let's look at the traditional backup method. This is the most traditional, kind of what most IT staff are used to, especially with our smaller companies. Essentially, you start out with a server that essentially has agents that specify application type, what type of operating system, that sort of thing. And the server resides, or the agent resides on that server. And then you typically have a media server where the tape drive is actually physically attached. That typically is where you put your core license for the backup software that you're using. Essentially, what most folks do is to at 5 o'clock they'll start their backup job. Traditionally, the server will initiate the backup, and all of the agents associated with the different application servers backup information across the network to that media server to get backed up to tape. The problem with this is typically snapshots are created on the actual server itself where the agent's located instead of on the actual media server. That presents a few problems, mainly just overhead associated with the backups. Obviously, you're going to be flooding the network during that time, so you're going to have a very limited amount of time that you can actually do the backup. And more importantly, there's overhead associated with doing those snapshots. Obviously, the other big detrimental problem with doing this type of a backup strategy is media cost. Every day, you're using a tape to do full backups and even into incremental backups. For those of you with environments that require multiple tapes, you can definitely feel for the fact that adds up pretty fast. The big thing that we want to make sure to point on is that this is a traditional method of going. There's nothing wrong with this method. It's just definitely not one of the more efficient ways of doing things. Strategy with continuous backup. Essentially, using this method, what we're going to do is find a server to use as the media server with the traditional method. You can even attach a tape drive to it, but it is where your core license is going to sit. And essentially, we want to try and provide that server with some sort of disk space, usually just enough to cover at least a week's worth of backup strategy. So if you have 100 gigabyte, total storage, then it probably would not be a bad idea to use, somewhere in the neighborhood of, 500 to a terabyte, just to make sure you have room that you can archive as much as you deem necessary. So once we put the servers in place with their agents, what we're essentially going to do this time is use continuous backup, which is throughout the day. As changes are made on a bit level, those changes are written to disk locally on the server, but they're also sent over to the actual media server where they're backed up to disk. The big advantage with this is, first of all, that you're going to be able to set up recovery points. Essentially think of them as snapshots to where you have your full backup maybe from the day before, but then as changes are made, you can store those changes hourly, bi-hourly, 2 or 3 times a day, so that if you need to recover that server, you can recover from a very specific time. The other big advantage with this, obviously, is that the agent is copying these changes as they're made to the actual media server, so the media server is taking care of setting up the recovery points, thus eliminating the overhead on the servers. You're also going to notice that this way, because there's such a minimal impact on the network with such small packets being sent across the wire, there's no really need to have to do this after 5 o'clock. You can do this throughout the day with minimal impact, and if you really want to play it extra cautious, you can even VLAN some of that traffic, just a dedicated VLAN just for backups. So in your actual management console, you'll notice that you can schedule your actual snapshots and how long you want to archive those for. So you can do snaps every hour. You can do them every 2 hours. Like we said before, you can do them really as many times as you want. 1 hour is the maximum for all the agents except for Exchange. Exchange you can actually do every 15 minutes under most platforms. The other thing that we're looking at is retention policy. So essentially most of your major backup softwares allow you to choose how long you want to keep these recovery points before they're actually written over. So we have options here that you can see where you can keep one daily, you can keep them weekly for a set number of weeks, and you can keep them actually monthly for a set number of months for long-term archival. Obviously, keep in mind some of this may require a little more storage, but with terabyte SATA hard drives being as cheap as they are these days, that's really not too hard to accomplish. So moving forward again, as those hit their recovery retention policies, essentially you begin to write over those recover points so that you're not wasting disk space. The size of the recovery point equals the size of the changes. So as an example, if you have 100 gigs again as your all the storage on your entire environment, and you guys only change 5% of that on a daily basis, or specifically even if you only change 0.5% of that on an hourly basis, that will be the size of the recover point. Very small and a very minimal impact on disk size. The nice thing about this is that when you're doing the recovery, you no longer have to go back to tapes to do that restore process. We all know that the building burning down is not typically what we use recovery for. It's typically somebody has deleted an email or a PowerPoint presentation, and we as IT people have to go and fish through tapes to go and try to find that. This allows for a much easier restore of those little files, as you can just go and do a search for those on local disk and actually again be able to restore those files at certain points of the day. So if it becomes corrupted, say at 3 o'clock, and someone's been working on this all day, you can do a restore from 2 so that they don't lose an entire day's worth of work. The other thing to keep in mind is that you can store these recover points to tape for long-term archival. So again, if you have a limited amount of disk space, you can ship these off to tape. Note that the recovery point will be a full backup of that recover point. The snapshot goes away and essentially will give you a full version to restore from. But that's the basics. If you want, just always be sure to contact your Dell sales representatives, and they will be sure to get anybody on the phone that you want to maybe deep dive a little further about this subject. But we appreciate your time and hope that you've found it useful. Have a good day.